In this video, we will be looking at best practices for naming files. We'll be looking at where you should be saving your files and archiving them in terms of best practices. We will be looking at navigating in terms of your computer system and creating file hierarchies and structures, just very briefly. And we'll also be looking at finding and searching for files, but also very briefly. So when it comes to naming your files and folders, it's good to have a consistent system that gives you valuable information about what your work is. So here are some guidelines. First of all, your file and folder names should be clear and descriptive, but not too descriptive. You don't want a whole story about the files. That's going to become unwieldy. You should include your project name in your files, and also what version. So versioning is really important. As you are working, save versions of your work so that you can always go back to previous versions if you need to. Sometimes necessary to include the date. In fact, often it's necessary. And then also avoid vague names. Things like final and new and untitled and my work. Those are meaningless. Avoid special characters. In fact, your operating system will prevent you from using special characters in file and folder names. Things like $signs, @signs, hashtags, percentage signs, exclamation marks, forward slashes, things like that. Avoid spaces. So this is one of those things where you might, it's okay if you do have spaces, but it's best not to. So instead of a space between words, use underscores or dashes and use it consistently. You'll see the example in a moment. And finally, be consistent. So let's have a look at an example here. So the first example is just general, like if you're not a student, if you're a freelancer or a designer or whatever. And that is the project name, followed by the version, followed by your initials. So if you're working in an agency, people want to know who did this file, and then a date. So here you've got Acme rebrand, that's the project name, V2, version 2, your initials, and then the date. If you were a student, you might do it slightly differently. So you see the example 2, the student's number is first, followed by the student name, followed by the name of the project, followed by the version, followed by the date. So whatever you decide to do when it comes to your file naming, be consistent, because if you're consistent, it means you can find your files more easily. Okay, let's have a look at where to save files. So I am a big advocate of working on your desktop while you are working on your current projects. Your operating system kind of is designed to work faster when your work is on a local hard drive, and the desktop is the most convenient place for that. Some people work in documents, but I'm not a fan of that because all sorts of other stuff goes into documents. Your desktop is really your space, much the same as if you were in the real world. Your desk is where you put your stuff and where you work. So my advice to you is use folders and subfolders in a smart way to organize your work. Be super organized. That's always the sign of a good designer. Create a main project folder. So whatever your project is, have a folder that contains everything else. And your client name, your project name, student number and name if you're a student, with your subject name, so if it's whatever it is, graphic design, and then the project name. Be logical in your organization of files and folders. So even if, I know when designers get into the flow and they're designing, sometimes they're a bit chaotic and their files just get messed up all over the place. But once you get to a certain point, it starts to slow you down. So then maybe there's certain points where you need to say, I need to get everything together and I need to be more organized. Just make sure that you're logical in your organization. So for example, save your source files in a folder, your assets in a folder, your exports, your references, whatever project it is, be organized with your folders and subfolders. Back up your work to external sources. That can be an external hard drive or a cloud drive, but don't work from your external or your cloud drive. That's a place for you to make backups or archive your work. But when you're actually working on your project, try and work from your desktop. It's just the most convenient way to work. And then try and keep your current projects local on your computer. Yeah, I just said that. So here's an example of both Mac and Windows, a good file and folder structure. So you can see there's an overall folder, Mike's Projects, and then there's client names with years attached to them, and then what type of job it was, so Christmas specials, and then subfolders with final photos, other reference vector assets. So it's quite a nice folder structure, and if you use that together with your file naming convention, you're in good shape. Okay, so let's have a look at how you find files. So I'm not going to go through how do you use the search feature on Windows and Mac. There's probably millions of videos on YouTube that you can watch. But I just want to discuss it in general as a concept. So in my opinion, if you follow all the previous steps I've discussed in this video, you should never lose files, and you should be able to find them easily. You should be in control. I see too many students, when I ask them to open a file, going straight to the search and searching for the file name because they don't actually know where it is on their computer. And that's bad. You need to know where that file is. The only time you should be using search is if you have maybe accidentally lost a file somewhere, or if it's just a quick way for you to find a file. But you should know where your stuff is. So consistent and logical file naming, best practices for file and folder locations, and backing up regularly to an external source. Those are all the things you should be doing. And if you're doing that, you shouldn't lose your files. But both Mac and Windows have robust search options to find files and folders. And if you have named your stuff correctly, you can base your searches on things like dates, versions, client names, and keywords, and that's helpful. So if you've named your files properly, it's easier to search for them. And then finally, do not rely on search and find to access files. You should always be in control and understand your project locations and file and folder hierarchy. That's really important. All right, so finally, here's just two examples of searching on the Mac desktop for the word Christmas, and it's found Christmas specials, and on Windows Christmas, and it's found Christmas specials. Just an example of using search and find. If you want to know more about how to build complex searches and that, you can do your own research on that. There's lots of other videos on that.